Jet lag hit me like a brick wall as I dragged my suitcase up the familiar driveway. A year of volunteer work in rural Kenya had changed me. Teaching local children, digging wells, and providing medical aid had made me think deeply about the true value of life. But this house hadn't changed at all. The white walls, the well-manicured lawn, the rose garden my mother cherished, they were all exactly as I remembered. Exhausted, I fumbled through my bag for the house key, hands trembling, not just from fatigue. "Lucy?" I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen window. "You're early." 6 hours earlier than scheduled. I gave her a weak wave and dropped my luggage at the front door. The first thing I wanted to do was see the only keepsake I had left of my father. His beautiful 1995 Lexus LS 400, metallic blue with a cream leather interior. I headed straight for the garage. It was the car he'd cherished for 15 years. Every weekend he waxed it, changed the oil himself, and treated it like a living thing. "One day it'll be yours," he used to say when I was in high school. "After you graduate college, I'll pass her on to you. But take care of her. Cars choose their owners." He died of a sudden heart attack 2 years ago. It happened just before I left for Kenya. I attended the funeral and stayed to see my mother remarry before heading overseas. Still, the pain of losing him hadn't healed. That Lexus was my last connection to him, my only physical memory. I pressed the garage button, and the door lifted to reveal an empty space. My heart slammed against my ribs. A dark oil stain on the concrete marked the spot like a chalk outline at a crime scene. The toolbox was gone. So was the car cover he always used. Everything had vanished. "Mom!" I ran into the house, shouting. "Where's Dad's car?" She was sitting on the living room couch with my stepfather, Jim, looking over some documents. When she heard my voice, she looked up, momentarily confused, then forced a smile. "Oh, that car? We sold it." "Sold it?" The words caught in my throat. "Yes. It was just a car, wasn't it?" She shrugged. "It was just collecting dust in the garage. And it was expensive to maintain. We had more pressing concerns." Jim cut in. Allison's situation got worse. Her gambling debt exceeded $30,000. Collectors were getting aggressive. We didn't have time to wait. Allison, Jim's daughter from a previous marriage, my stepsister by law, someone I'd only lived with for a year before leaving for Kenya. Back then, she'd been withdrawn, barely interacting with me. I'd only heard about her gambling addiction through my mother. I didn't really know her situation. But that car was supposed to be mine. My voice trembled. Dad said in his will. My mother interrupted. "While you were off in Kenya, we had to make practical decisions. The title was in both mine and your father's name during our marriage, so I had the legal right. Joint ownership? That can't be. The inheritance was processed legally through the executor. I even signed a power of attorney." Jim pulled out a paper from the stack. "Use this as your consent. No one would notice unless they did a handwriting analysis." I stared at him in shock. They had forged my signature. While I was risking my life to help children in a developing country, my family had secretly sold off my father's keepsake, and they did it using illegal means. "That car was full of memories," I whispered, tears sliding down my cheeks. "Of Dad, and memories live in your head," my mother said coldly. "Face reality. If we hadn't helped Allison, who knows what would have happened to her? She's family." But Allison had only become family 2 years ago. She was 10 years younger than me, and I had no idea what kind of life she'd been living while I was away. I started to question whether the story about Allison's gambling addiction, something I had only heard from my mother, was even true. "How much did you sell it for?" $28,000, Jim replied. "Not bad for a car that old. Considering it's over a decade old, I'd say we did pretty well. My father had paid over $60,000 for it when he bought it new. And now, that meticulously maintained car had been sold off for a fraction of its worth. What happened to the money? Of course, it went to pay off Allison's debts. My mother answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. We're family. It's only fair, isn't it? We helped you too, remember? When you need it. Yes, during college, my parents had supported me financially, tuition, rent, groceries. But that was so I could focus on my studies, build a future, and give back to society. Allison's gambling addiction wasn't even remotely the same. That night, I locked myself in my father's study. I looked through what was left of his belongings, his journals, old photographs. There were dozens of photos with the Lexus. My dad washing it, inspecting the engine, taking me for drives with me in the passenger seat. In every single picture, he looked truly happy. And now, those memories had been ripped away from me so casually. I began planning how I would get back at my mother and Jim. On the third afternoon after I returned home, I was alone in my father's study, sorting through his things. My mother and Jim were out, and the house was completely silent. As I opened one of the desk drawers, my phone rang. The number was local, but I didn't recognize it. Hello? Is this Lucy Manning? A man's voice asked with a slight Spanish accent. Yes, it is. My name is Carlos Lopez. I run Lopez used cars off Highway 9. My heart skipped a beat. It was about the car. I'd like to speak with you about your father's 1995 Lexus LS400. My father's car? Yes. Someone brought it in a few days ago to sell. But there was something about the situation I couldn't ignore. I was hoping we could speak in person, if possible. My voice trembled as I replied, I'll be there right away. An hour later, I pulled into the lot of a typical used car dealership along Highway 9. There was a large sign, rows of cars, and colorful flags fluttering in the wind. But in the back, I immediately spotted the familiar, elegant silhouette. My father's Lexus. As I walked into the showroom, a Hispanic man in his mid-40s with a solid build and a kind expression greeted me. You must be Lucy. Thank you for coming on such short notice, he said, shaking my hand. There's something I felt you needed to know. Me? Why? It's about the car. The person who brought it in had a power of attorney under your name. So on paper, everything looked legitimate. But something didn't sit right with me. I have the right to refuse questionable transactions, so the sale hasn't gone through yet. The seller didn't know a thing about the car, he continued. Nothing about the maintenance history, features, or anything. And they were crying, said they desperately needed cash. It felt like they were cornered. My voice broke. That car belonged to my dad. After he passed, my family sold it behind my back. Carlos let out a long sigh. I thought so. There's something else I need to show you. He turned toward the Lexus. While inspecting the car, I found something unusual. He popped the hood. See this? This small panel, it's not standard. Someone added it later. Now that he pointed it out, I saw a small metallic panel, expertly concealed in a corner. It was so discreet you'd never notice unless you were looking for it. There was an envelope inside, but I didn't think it was right to open it. So I left it as is. Inside the panel was a waterproof envelope. Written on the front, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, was one word. Lucy. Your father hid this for you, Carlos said softly. I believe it's meant for you. My hand trembled as I reached for the envelope. It was heavier than I expected, as if something solid was tucked inside. Do you mind if I open it here? Carefully, I unsealed it. Inside was a letter and a small key. The letter was written in my father's neat handwriting. To my dearest Lucy, if you're reading this letter, it means something has happened to me, and the car must have encountered some trouble as well. First, I want you to know, this car belongs entirely to you. If anyone in the family tries to sell it or deny your rights, contact attorney Tom Gill immediately. All the legal paperwork is in place. The unclosed key belongs to safety deposit box #447 at First National Bank. You must go there. I'm so proud of the incredible work you're doing overseas. But I also want you to take care of yourself. This car and what's in the deposit box are meant to help you live by your own values. No matter what, you'll always be my pride and joy. With all my love, Dad. P.S. Change the engine oil every 3,000 miles. This car will never let you down. Tears blurred the words before I could finish reading. My father had prepared for all of this, quietly, secretly, thinking of my future, anticipating even the possibility that my mother and Jim might cause trouble. I'd like to cancel the sale, I said to Carlos. May I ask why? My heart almost stopped. I can pay, if that's the issue. No, that's not it, Carlos said, shaking his head. I'm canceling the sale. This car was yours from the start. Forging a power of attorney is a serious crime. What happens next is entirely your choice. But what about? I have a daughter too, Carlos said, glancing at a framed photo of his family. If something happened to me and someone sold off what meant the most to her without her knowing, I'd be furious, even from the afterlife. I understand your father's heart. I stood up and grasped his hand tightly. Thank you. I'm sure my dad would be grateful too. That evening, I drove my father's Lexus home. The feel of the steering wheel, the comfort of the seat, the low rumble of the engine, everything brought his presence back to me. But the real battle had just begun. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Jim's stunned face peering through the living room window. When I turned off the engine and stepped out, the front door flew open. How do you have that car? My mother shouted, rushing toward me in panic. It was supposed to be sold. I thought the sale was still being processed? I replied calmly. Jim came running outside, looking flustered. It was, but how did you find out? There's something I want to ask you. I pulled my father's letter from my chest pocket. Do you realize the sale of that car was completely illegal? My mother's face turned pale. What are you talking about? My father wrote a valid will. That car was left to me. What you did was theft. My mother couldn't hide her unease. But we had an obligation to help Allison. She's family. Just then, Allison emerged from the house. She was 10 years younger than me, only 18, but years of isolation had made her seem even younger. Her shoulder-length hair was unkempt, and her eyes darted nervously. Hey, Lucy. Welcome home, she said awkwardly. I'm sorry about the car, but Dad said it was really necessary. Necessary? I stared at her. Allison, were you really gambling? A confused look crossed her face. Gambling? Allison, don't say another word, Jim snapped, cutting her off. She's my daughter. You don't get to question my decisions. But it was my inheritance that was used. Are you sure it was really Allison's problem? Or was it about your app business? A beat of silence followed. Where did you hear that? My mother asked, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Neighborhood gossip. I lied smoothly. In truth, I had learned it from Carlos when I recovered the Lexus. It was Allison who had come to sell the car, with the forged power of attorney. No doubt she had done it at her father's instruction. Carlos had apparently been unsettled by how Allison had cried when she brought in the car. He said he ended up asking her more about the situation. According to him, Allison mentioned something about investing in her father's app business. Jim's face hardened. That's irrelevant. No, it's very relevant. You claimed the money was to pay off Allison's gambling debts, but the truth is, you planned to funnel it into your latest business idea, didn't you? My stepfather had a long history of failed ventures. His latest project was a smartphone app. This app has potential. If it succeeds, the whole family benefits, he barked. Without my consent? Families should share resources, my mother cut in. While you were off chasing ideals in Kenya, we were making realistic investments. I took a deep breath. So you sold my father's keepsake without permission, used the money under the guise of helping Allison with gambling debts, and planned to put it into your business instead. And now you're justifying it as family resource sharing, without even asking me. That's right, my mother said unapologetically. You're young, you don't understand yet. This is how family works. Being family doesn't make criminal acts okay. I pulled out my phone. I'm going to report this to the police. Jim glared at me. You want to go down the legal route, Lucy? Fine. But don't forget, we supported you. All the costs of raising you, your college tuition, your living expenses, do you know how much that adds up to? That was your responsibility as parents. And besides, you're not even my real father. We only lived together for 1 year. My mother scoffed. Responsibility? The money we spent on you far outweighs the value of one old car. And this is how you repay the man who raised you? I was stunned by their words. Jim stood up. Get out. You don't belong in this house anymore. This house was half my father's, which means now, half of it is mine. What did you say? I smiled. My father's will include the house. I'll be looking into the details. Stay tuned. That night, I checked into a nearby hotel. I parked the Lexus and sat behind the wheel for a while, thinking. The time had come to decide how I was going to live the rest of my life. The next morning, I walked through the heavy doors of First National Bank. At the front desk, I requested access to the safety deposit box. An employee led me to a secure room. Box 447, right this way. She retrieved a small metal box and left me alone. I reached into my bag with trembling hands and pulled out the key my father had given me. It fit perfectly. A soft click sounded as the lock released. Inside were several thick envelopes. I opened the first one. It contained another letter from my father, this time typed. To my dearest Lucy, if you are reading this, then my intuition was correct. Your mother and Jim have caused trouble, and you are likely in a difficult position. First, I want to tell you how deeply I love you and how proud I am. The work you're doing in Kenya is truly extraordinary, but I've always worried that your kindness could be taken advantage of. Just because someone is family does not mean you owe them compliance. You have the right to live your life on your own terms. Please review the enclosed documents carefully. Investment account summary. For the past 15 years, I've been investing monthly for your future. The current estimated value should be around $120,000. Education Trust Fund. $50,000 set aside for you to use in any educational or charitable endeavor you choose. Deed of ownership. You own 50% of the house. Your mother owns the other half, but any sale requires your approval. Original will. All legal details are outlined clearly. These assets exist so you can live by your values. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. I wish you success and happiness. With eternal love, Dad. Tears blurred my vision again. My father had thought through every aspect of my life and prepared for it. He had even anticipated that the family might one day cause trouble. He had loved me more than I ever realized. And now it was clear just how far my mother and stepfather had gone to deceive me and steal from me. Before leaving the bank, I confirmed the management of the investment accounts. Both were officially in my name. I had full, immediate access. That afternoon, I visited the office of attorney Tom Gale. A gentleman in his early 60s, Tom had been a close friend of my father's. Your father spoke about you with such pride, he said warmly. Have you been informed about the inheritance? Yes. I'm fully aware of everything. In fact, your mother and Jim came to see me just yesterday. What? They came to discuss selling the house. But I explained that it wouldn't be possible without your consent. They claimed they had a power of attorney because you were overseas, but it was forged. Tom nodded. I figured. The handwriting didn't match yours at all. Your father had left me several of your handwritten letters. I compared them. So, What are my options now? There are several. You could pursue a civil lawsuit to press charges for forgery. Or you could choose a more private resolution within the family. He looked at me carefully. But I'll say this, you have a very strong legal position. They must realize they're in a precarious spot. I don't want reconciliation. I want independence. A wise decision. You've inherited more than enough. You don't need to rely on them. That evening, I returned home. My mother and Jim were seated in the living room, deep in conversation with grim expressions. They looked up when they heard my footsteps. "Lucy," my mother said, her voice trembling. "You went to see the lawyer, didn't you?" "Yes. And I went to the bank too," I replied calmly. "I know everything now, including the house. I'll be moving out tomorrow." I announced it without hesitation. I found a new apartment. As for the house ownership, I'll work it out with my attorney. "Wait," my mother said, rising from the couch. "Let's talk this through. We're family." "Family?" I turned to face her. "How many times did you reach out to me during that entire year? Did you ever ask how I was doing? Did you ever worry about the dangers I faced overseas?" She was silent. "Not once. But when you needed money, you sold my inheritance without even asking. Is that your idea of a family conversation?" "That's not." My anger surged. "Not for my birthday. Not for Christmas. Not even when I got sick abroad. Nothing." Jim tried to speak. "Lucy, that's—" "Shut up." I glared at him. "You've only been part of this family for 2 years. What do you know about my life? How dare you sell off my father's memory and talk to me about family?" My mother looked at me, almost pleading. "Can't you help us? We're family." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Mom, I think we have very different definitions of that word." I pulled the house key off my keyring. "To me, family means respect, support, mutual care. But to you, it just means access, a resource to be used." "That's not true," she cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I love you." "Love?" I gave a sad smile. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have sold my father's keepsake without my consent. If you loved me, you'd have called me while I was working overseas. If you loved me, you wouldn't have forged documents to deceive me." "But—" "Enough," I said, waving her off. "Mom, I've been your daughter for 28 years. But that ends today. From now on, we're strangers." Jim stood up, his voice rising. "Are you even human? Abandoning your mother like this?" I stared at him coldly. "Who abandoned whom? Who sold off their daughter's inheritance? You want to talk about being human? Look in the mirror." My mother sank to the floor, sobbing. "Lucy, please." For a moment, my heart hesitated, but I didn't stop. "Goodbye, Mom." I walked toward the front door without looking back. Let's live separate lives from now on. No more interference. As I climbed into the Lexus, I heard my mother's sobs echo from the house. I started the engine, holding back my own tears. This was the end, but also a beginning. Thanks to the legacy my father left, I no longer had to worry about money. Now I could truly live according to my values. Tomorrow, my new life would begin. Fueled by my father's love and the lessons I learned abroad, I was ready to walk my own path. A month later, I received a letter from Allison. It was a long apology written in shaky handwriting. "Lucy, I need to tell you the truth. I never had a gambling problem. My dad told me to say that. The truth is, he made some terrible investment decisions, and he sold your car to cover up the losses. I was too scared to say no. He raised me alone from a young age, so I always felt I had to obey him, no matter what. I barely even knew you when we became family 2 years ago. And yet, I did something unforgivable. I'm so sorry. But now, I've decided to cut ties with my father. I started working part-time and plan to live independently. I hope that someday you'll be able to forgive me. Allison. As I pulled away from the house, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. It had been the place where 28 years of my life unfolded. But I wouldn't look back again. Reading her letter brought tears to my eyes. Allison had been a victim of Jim too. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my bright new apartment in the city, sipping morning coffee. Below me, the city buzzed with life. Beyond the skyline, mountains stretched across the horizon. This was the life I had chosen. The first few weeks after moving were chaotic. I felt the weight of cutting ties with my family completely. But gradually, I found peace. Thanks to my father's inheritance, I had no financial pressure and time to truly consider what I wanted to do with my life. Drawing from my experiences in Kenya, I launched a new project. A nonprofit organization focused on education in developing countries and raising awareness of global cooperation in the U.S. The education trust my father had left became the foundation for this project. At times, I felt guilty for severing all ties with my family. But I realized those ties had only ever held me back. The following week, I received the appraisal report for the house. Ever since the day I cut ties with my mother, I had been quietly moving forward with selling the house. The offer came in at $240,000, far more than expected. My 50% share would amount to $120,000. It was more than enough to expand the nonprofit's activities. Around the same time, I had a crucial conversation with Tom Gill, my lawyer. You have every right to press charges for forgery and theft. The evidence is solid. If convicted, they could face serious penalties. I was silent for a long time before answering. I've decided not to press charges. May I ask why? You'd almost certainly win. For several reasons, I said, looking out the window. First, lawsuits take time and energy. I want to move forward with my life. I don't want to waste time chained to old anger. Tom nodded. And even if my mother went to prison, what would that give me? Satisfaction? Revenge? Those feelings fade. I think my father would prefer I focus on building a life worth living, not tearing others down. I continued. One thing I learned in Kenya: hate only breeds more hate. Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for me. Legal victories don't always bring peace. But what about justice? Justice has already been served. I smiled. They've lost the inheritance, the house, and their relationships. They're facing financial hardship. That's more than enough punishment. Besides, I have more than enough from what my father left me. I don't need to fight for what was taken. I want to build with what I have. Tom gave a deep nod. Your father would be proud. Choosing growth over vengeance. That's a real victory. And in that moment, I felt truly free. Not suing wasn't about forgiving them. It was about freeing myself. After the appraisal, Tom handled the negotiations regarding the house sale. I chose not to meet my mother in person. Everything went through the attorney. At first, she was emotional. Tom later told me, she cried, said she couldn't bear to sell a house filled with memories. But once she heard the valuation, her tone changed completely. Actually, Jim's business isn't doing well. We need more capital. We've been denied loans. With that money, maybe. Tom said her voice had taken on a clearly calculated tone. And really, the upkeep and taxes were a burden. If Lucy wants to sell, I'll agree. He reported back to me later. Your mother ultimately supported the sale enthusiastically. The financial appeal was too tempting to ignore. I had mixed feelings hearing that. To her, money mattered more than memories. Our values couldn't have been more different. 6 months after the sale, I happened to hear about my mother and Jim's current situation. Tom contacted me. Lucy, your mother and Jim seem to be facing financial trouble. He explained that Jim's app venture had completely failed. They had not only lost all the money invested, but also taken on more debt. Your mother, after receiving her $120,000 share, was persuaded by Jim to reinvest it. They lost nearly all of it, close to $60,000. Their plans to buy a condo fell through, and now they were living in a small rental apartment. Even that rent was reportedly behind. Your mother, she's hoping you might help them. I won't, I said without hesitation. If they're struggling, they can apply for public assistance. They'll receive nothing from me. Meanwhile, my relationship with Allison slowly began to heal. She had cut ties with Jim and found a job in elder care. She was living independently now. Once a month, we met for coffee and exchanged updates. We weren't blood related, but we had built something close to a true sisterhood. One evening after seeing Allison, I sat looking at photos sent from the school in Kenya. The children's smiles reminded me of the meaning behind my journey. Holding on to my father's legacy, I continued walking my path. Beyond family, I was building something greater, a life lived for humanity as a whole. That was the life I had chosen.